Good afternoon, everyone. Next target in climate change debate, your gas stove, residential and commercial buildings. They're worried about 12% of U.S. gas emissions. Oh, wait, why don't we talk about China? Because looking at the global total, 12% of all emissions in the entire world are coming from the United States, and 12% of that 12% is only 1.4% of all global emissions, yet they need to remove all of our stoves. Well, I think you're probably going to need those stoves when this record cold comes through in the last days of September. Survey humans are mainly responsible for climate change? That needs to be reevaluated. And down the roller coaster we go. Why is nobody looking at solar activity except a select few? And how prepared are you for food shortages across the planet as we march into the 2020 era? 2-week grab-and-go food crate or the 4-week food supply? My Patriot Supply and Adapt 2030. The link's in the description box below, and it's another way to support the channel and the flow of information. Starting off here, Reuters, the next target in the climate change debate, your gas stove. Dozens of liberal-leaning states, such as California, Washington State, and Massachusetts, are studying proposals to ban or limit the use of natural gas in commercial and residential buildings, meaning your stoves, the heating supply, in this fight against climate change. This is borderline absurd. Now, Berkeley, California, became the first U.S. city to pass an ordinance banning gas systems in new buildings. And as you know, what California does, others follow. In the bottom paragraph there, local officials and environmentalists cite mounting evidence that unburned gas leaking from pipes and compressor stations harms the climate more than carbon dioxide. Digging further into the story, residential and commercial buildings account for about 12% of all U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. It's actually 12.2, but we'll call it 12, rounded off, according to the EPA. Now, so that's 12% of the entire total for the U.S. But then we take a look here, the top greenhouse gas emitters. This comes from the World Resources Institute, climate analytics from per capita emissions 2010 plus 2012, bringing us up to 2018. China, 22.4%. Why is nobody talking about China's emissions? That's point number one. Point number two is the United States, out of the entire global total, is 12.2% of emissions. That's real interesting that they're both matching at 12.2% for the article talking about the residential commercial buildings. So let's do the math on this. So China has the most carbon emissions globally. Yet nobody wants to talk about that. They don't want to talk about India, Indonesia. It's only the EU and the United States. What about all the other ones that you see on this list here? Do you ever hear about these other ones in the news frequently except Canada? Not really. So 12.2% of the United States, total global. Now let's do the math here. The residential commercial buildings, 12% of all greenhouse gases. It's actually 12.2. And then 12.2% of the entire global total. And when we do the percentage calculation on that, all of the natural gas for residential and commercial is only 1.48% of all global emissions. So you're telling me that something that's less than 2% of the entire whole now needs to be banned in its entirety. They like to talk about numbers and percentages. Well, here's an inconvenient number and percentage. I like numbers too. 1.48 does not constitute an emergency. And hey, California, if you want to ban all these cooking stoves and heating for residential and commercial buildings, this is what happens during the Grand Solar Minimum. You see those 16 to 20 degrees Celsius below normal temperatures, which is about 30 to 35 Fahrenheit below normal, coming at the end of September 29th. And let's roll into the 30th. It's going to stick around for several days. Do you think you'll need heat when it gets cold? That's just a very simple question. Looking through the GFS models, do you think this is an enormous amount of snowfall just a week after summer ends? It's a yes or a no question. I'm bringing us over here to surviving the super grand solar minimum. Down the roller coaster we go. Is anybody looking at the solar cycles and the tapering off? Because even going back to the 1700s, we don't see this same drop-off cycle after cycle after cycle. Just food for thought. Where do you think we're going to go with the global temperatures? Because this article on Zero Hedge here, only 38% of Americans believe humans mainly responsible for climate change. And this is a very interesting study. They went across the planet and they asked the average citizen, the average person on the street, not the IPCC's 97% consensus people, but just the average person on the street walking around. Do you think humans are mainly responsible for climate change? And take a look at some of these answers here. You would have thought with this 93% consensus and 4 decades of indoctrination that these numbers would be much, much higher than they are. Look at Norway. Only 35% of the people actually believe that humans are mainly responsible. United States 38%, Saudi Arabia 35%, we get up China 45%, France, Germany, less than half the Germans feel that we are mainly responsible for climate change. I bet they study the sun. I bet they study something about solar effects on our Earth's climate. Great Britain at just barely a sliver over half. Now you would have thought with 40 years of being pounded in the head, global warming, global warming, global warming, that these numbers would be near 90%. But something has gone very wrong in the control of the narrative here. India, though, on the other hand, 71%. And if you take a look at the Statistica article, which I've linked below, it goes through quite a few other countries as well. We're going to be coming into very, very low harvest figures. And as we move forward, the temperatures are going to continue to drop. I linked everything below in the description box, including the link to Winter is Coming, Cycles of Change and Transition, where I go into this with 110 slides explaining how we're going to march forward with timelines. It's also accompanied by an hour and 10-minute MP3 as I narrate through all the slides. You can follow along there. Links in the description box. And again, it's a way to support the channel. And I thank you for watching. Hope you did get something out of this video. And I will see you next time.